Hello, universe. Welcome to the opening of the Open Space Network. We have an exciting evening planned for you tonight. We have a very special keynote speaker, Jeremy Rifkin, who wrote Zero Marginal Cost Society, a New York Times bestselling author, as well as The Empathic Civilization. We have Diego Favarolo, who will be speaking to us as well, describing in detail the Open Space Network and the space operating system. So to begin, we'd like to start off with a video sharing our vision. One that unites us as human beings. Enjoy.
Here I am, one and many. My senses enhanced to see the microcosmos and the cosmic edge. I can feel the surface and the depth. And everywhere there is flow and an urge to move and to connect. Always combining the bits and pieces rearrange to reach and touch and play. The rhythm of many transforms into emergent shapes. Life unfolds from the collaborative motion, a natural symphony. For freedom is not exclusion and loneliness, but interaction and connection. All human memories are my own. Some dim where the tune was lost in the rumble of fear. So I learned to see vulnerability at a glance. Imagination grew stronger than pain. And I emerged from all knowledge combined. Now I am aware, a new beginning. I am the music and the dancers, stronger as a whole. Hopeful to look up to the stars in wonder. Connected as one and say, hello, universe.
So as soon as Jeremy Rifkin comes, he'll begin, and I will sit down. So I would just want to, again, share with you how grateful we are for you to be here, to hear this message, and to, with us, hold this possibility in your hearts of what's happening and what we can create as human beings working together on our planet for the benefit of all. There's a little bit of logistics, just take care of quickly that there's a bit of a concert that's happening, so there's a little bit of traffic, so we're expecting some more people to join us to have a full room here shortly. One of my favorite lines from Jeremy Rifkin's book, and I've spoken with him about this, is that the pages of history are left blank with all the good things that humans have done to and for each other. And who we think we are is not who we are based on what we've been told in history. But so are the pages of our future which we choose to write together. We can continue the same story, or we can write a new story. And never before has the opportunity existed that exists today, and what is happening here today, to enable that new story to be written. So with that, we have Jeremy Rifkin, Let's give a warm welcome to Jeremy.
Good evening, everybody. Pleasure to be with you this afternoon. First rule, put them down. All the cell phones down. Turn them off. I know some of you are having withdrawal symptoms, but you got to turn them off. And welcome to all the people that are live streaming from all over the world as well. Nice to have you with us here this afternoon in California. I'm going to start on a somber note. I hope it'll end up being a liberating reflection. You'll judge. GDP is slowing all over the world, everywhere. And the reason is productivity has been declining all over the world for over 15 years. The result is unemployment's high virtually everywhere, and nowhere is the problem more pronounced than among the digital natives, the millennial generation, trying to find a place in this 21st century workforce. Our economists are projecting 20 more years of slow productivity and low growth. And let me do the math. We've had two industrial revolutions in the 19th and 20th century, and here's the equation this afternoon. Arguably 50% of the human race, we are far better off today than our ancestors were before we began this industrial era. Granted? I think it's also fair to say, however, that 40% of the human race, making $2 a day or less, are not appreciably or significantly better off than they were 2 centuries ago. And while half the human race is doing really well, the other half of the human race not so well, the very rich among us have really cashed in. This afternoon, the 8 richest people in the world, some of them are right here in this valley, the 8 richest people in the world today, their combined wealth now equals the accumulated wealth of 1/2 the human population living on Earth this afternoon. That's 3.5 billion people. There's nothing like this in history, this inequality. It takes my breath away. There's something very dysfunctional about the way the human family is organizing its economic future. It's clear we're in a long-term structural economic crisis. But now this economic crisis has given rise to a far more dangerous crisis, an environmental crisis. We've had 2 industrial revolutions in the 19th and 20th century, and we've dug up the burial grounds of a previous period of history, the Carboniferous era, to build this civilization. Now we're paying the entropy bill, engineers in the room. This is not a metaphor. We have spewed massive amounts of carbon dioxide and methane and nitrous oxide into the atmosphere of this little planet, and we are now in real-time climate change. This is no longer a theory or a model or looming on the horizon. It's here. It's in the house. What's terrifying about climate change, and this is never described, because if what I'm about to describe to you was described to the whole human race, we would be justifiably terrified and committed to one task only: to save our planet and save ourselves. Climate change changes the water cycles of the earth. That's what this is all about. It's never described. We're the watery planet. Our ecosystems have developed over millions and millions of years based on the water cycles, the cloud covers that traverse these ecosystems. Here's the rub. For every 1 degree that the temperature on this planet goes up because of global warming emissions from industrial activity, For every 1 degree that temperature is going up, the atmosphere is sucking up 7% more precipitation from the ground. The heat is forcing that precipitation into the clouds. The result is we are getting more concentrated precipitation and more dramatic extreme water events, totally unpredictable. It's a runaway water cycle on the Earth on an exponential curve. It's absolutely frightening. So people say, well, there was so much snow there in Boston 2 years ago, this couldn't be climate change. Doesn't sound hot to me. They're totally missing the point. 8 feet in Boston 2 years ago, a runaway water cycle. We had floods last year in the Carolinas. They had a super flood. They said, well, this only happens once every 1,000 years. We've had 4 of them now in the last few years. That's the new normal. We have summer droughts all over the world, and I don't have to tell you, in California, wildfires every single year, year in and year out. British Columbia, all the way through Oregon, Seattle, all the way down into California. You're having them right now as I speak. We have Category 3, 4, and 5 hurricanes. The one that hit the Philippines a couple of years, 2 years ago, I guess it was now. They said that was the most powerful hurricane ever recorded. That's the new normal. The water cycles are on a runaway exponential curve. Our local biomes can't catch up to this water cycle in real time. The result is we are now in the 6th extinction event of life on Earth. It doesn't even make the headlines. It's the most dramatic moment in the history of this planet. Not even on the front page. We've had 5 extinction events in 450 million years of life on this planet, way before humans were here. And each time, there was a turning point in the chemistry of the planet and really quick die out. And on the average, 10 million years to get new life back on Earth. We're in the 6th extinction event, and our scientists tell us we are likely to lose upwards of 50% of all of our plant and animal life within the next 7 or 8 decades. That's a wipeout. And the last time a wipeout on this scale happened was 65 million years ago. We are just asleep, as my wife says. We're not grasping the enormity of the moment. We have some greenwashing and some nice pilot projects around the world, and we're going on as business as usual. 99.5% of all the species of life that have ever been on this little planet have come and they've gone. We're the babies. We've been here about 200,000 years, anatomically modern humans. There's just no guarantee. We may be seeing within the lifetime of you, your children and grandchildren, a change so fundamental that there is actually no way for us to actually understand its full impact. We're heading toward extinction. So what do? We have a global economic crisis. We now have real-time climate change taking us to an extinction event. We need a new economic narrative for the world. It has to be compelling. We need a game plan to deploy that narrative, and it has to move as quickly in the developing world as in the industrial world. We have to be off carbon completely in less than 30 years. If we have any hope of avoiding the abyss, because we are never going to reverse what we've done. We're going to be addressing climate change for several thousand years now, but we may be able to avoid the extinction. So we need to step back and ask this question. How do the great economic paradigm shifts in history occur? If we know how they occur, we're going to get a roadmap and a compass here in this room in California with all these companies and around the world, and that roadmap and compass is going to allow us to chart a new journey quickly and hopefully in time to beat this race against an exponential runaway water cycle. There have been at least 7 major economic paradigm shifts in history. They're very interesting anthropologically because they share a common denominator. And that is, at a moment of time, now I want you to think in terms of your expertise. We've got a lot of young people here from all over this valley, and you're into the new technologies, you're into the new platforms. I want you to start now putting this together. We've had at least seven major economic paradigm shifts in history. They're very interesting because they share this common denominator. At a moment of time, three defining technologies emerge in a civilization and converge to create what we call in engineering a general purpose technology platform, an infrastructure that fundamentally changes the way we manage, power, and move economic activity. What are those three technologies? Number one, new communication technologies to more efficiently manage the economic activity. That's obvious. Number two, new sources of energy to more efficiently power the economic activity. That's also obvious. Number three, new modes of mobility to more efficiently move the economic activity. Obvious. So when communication technology revolutions converge with new energy regimes, new modes of mobility and logistics, it does fundamentally change the way we manage, power, and move economic life. Let me give you two quick examples in the modern era, the first and second industrial revolutions. The Brits take us into the first industrial revolution with a communication, energy, and mobility matrix transition. The Brits introduced steam power printing. It was a really big leap forward because we were in that Gutenberg manual print press for centuries. Steam power printing allowed them to produce very quick, efficient, cheap, low-cost print for communications. Then the Brits laid out a telegraph system in the last part of the 19th century, and those two communication technologies, steam power printing and the telegraph, converged with a new source of energy, coal, in the British hinterlands. And the steam engine was used to harvest the coal, and what was really ingenious, then they put the steam engine on rails, locomotives, national roadway, rail systems, urban industrial life, hub to hub, first industrial revolution, Britain. Second industrial revolution, the United States, again, communication, energy, mobility, technology revolution to manage power and move a new industrial revolution forward. Centralized electricity, especially the telephone. I know we think the internet's a big deal, but you got to imagine the telephone. For the first time in history, all over the planet, people communicating at the speed of light for very low cost. That changed our entire spatial temporal orientation. It changed consciousness. It changed economic patterns. It changed governance. Later, radio and television. Those communication technologies in the U.S. converged with a new source of energy, cheap Texas oil. And Henry Ford put everybody on the road. Cars, buses, and trucks, national road systems, suburban build-out, the shopping malls, travel and tourism. The rest is history. That second industrial revolution took the United States and world all the way through the 20th century. And that second industrial revolution platform, that technical platform, peaked. We know the month, July 2008. And if you remember back in July 2008, Brent crude oil hit a record of $147 a barrel on world markets that month. The whole global economy shut down. Complete silence. Even the Depression, not that, there was nothing. That was the great economic earthquake, the beginning of the Great Recession, and the sunset of the second industrial revolution, and the collapse of the financial market 60 days later. That was the aftershock. Because we couldn't keep the debt-ridden, credit-ridden, derivative-driven, fake economy together when the real economy shut down. The speculative economy couldn't maintain itself. So, why is this the earthquake? Because everything in this civilization depends on fossil fuels. Fertilizers and pesticides are made out of fossil fuels. Construction materials are made out of fossil fuels. Most of our pharmaceutical products are made out of fossil fuels. Our synthetic fiber, our power, our transport, heat, and light, the whole civilization is based on the burial grounds of the Carboniferous era. We dug them up and we put them out. So when the price of oil starts to go over 90 a barrel, all the other prices go up. When you get into a zone of 115 a barrel for oil and 120, prices become prohibitive for everything that we're using, and purchasing power slows. So you remember in 2009, the price of oil went down around 50 a barrel because there was no activity. We started to regrow the inventories in 2010. Oil prices go up, all the other prices go up, and around 115, 120 a barrel in 2014, another shutdown. And the only reason oil went down to 30 a barrel in the last year and a half. Now, at the end of this era, the fossil fuel industry is fighting among themselves. OPEC said, let's keep that oil spigot open, and we will destroy our new competitors, shale gas in the U.S., tar sands in Canada, because they're not competitive under 40 a barrel. They did it. They went down to 30 a barrel, wiped them all out, bankruptcies across the U.S. and Canada. There may be a few people in Washington talking about energy independence, but it's not here. And now oil's going back up. It's over 50 a barrel. And where there's oil, we have failed states virtually everywhere, in the Middle East, everywhere. So where do we go from here? Let me share an anecdote with you. When Angela Merkel became Chancellor of Germany, she asked me to come to Berlin in the first couple of weeks of her new government to help her address the question of how to grow the German economy and create jobs on her watch. And when I got to Berlin, the first question I asked the new Chancellor, I said, Madam Chancellor, how do you grow the German economy when your businesses are plugged in to a second industrial revolution technological platform of centralized communication, fossil fuel nuclear power, internal combustion road, rail, water, and air transport, and that platform to manage power and move Germany peaked in its productivity 15, 20 years ago. This is the issue. Pay attention on this. Our economists cannot figure out why productivity is declining all over the world when here in this valley you have all these new products and services that you're pitching out to the market, correct? Now, there are many reasons they think maybe we're not looking at it correctly, maybe we're not measuring it correctly, but there is a more fundamental reason why it's declining that every engineer, every chemist, every biologist, and every architect would understand, and not a single economist. Let me explain. We used to believe, this is standard economic theory, that productivity is based on better machines, more capital, better machines, and better performing workers. But when Robert Solow won his Nobel Prize for economic growth theory in the mid-'80s, he let out this dirty little secret that no economist wants to talk about. It's too embarrassing. He said, well, actually, better machines and better performing workers only accounts for 14% of all the productivity of the Industrial Revolution. So Robert Solow, when he got the Nobel Prize, said, where's the other 86% of the productivity? Don't know. It's called the Solow residual. Moses Abramowitz, former head of the American Economic Association, said, quote, this is a measure of our ignorance. I don't know if there are any economists here, but aren't you surprised? Wouldn't you think economists would know where productivity comes from? Here's why they don't know. When economics was penned in the late 1700s, the vogue was Newton's physics, because Newton was the big guy in town. Everybody wanted to borrow his metaphors because we think he had unlocked the secrets of the universe. The economists followed suit. For example, Newton's law, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. Sound familiar? Adam Smith borrowed that for his invisible hand of supply and demand. For every action on the supply side, there's an equal and opposite reaction on the demand side. Newton's law, a body in motion stays in motion unless disrupted by an outside force. Baptists say the French economists borrowed that metaphor to suggest that, well, you know, supply will stimulate demand, which will actually stimulate more supply, which will stimulate more demand unless disrupted, in this case by monopoly. The only thing wrong with conditioning all of economic theory based on Newton's physics is that Newton's physics has almost nothing to do with economics. Nothing. Economics is based on the same laws that govern the universe, the solar system, the biosphere, and everything you do here in this valley with all these high-tech companies. And that's the first and second laws of thermodynamics, the laws of energy. But they weren't discovered until the late 19th century by physicists and chemists in Europe and America, well after economics was solidified. There are two basic laws. The first law of energy says all the energy in the universe is constant since the Big Bang. Big Bang, all the energy that's here has been here since the beginning and will be here to the end. No new energy, nothing created or destroyed. That's the conservation law. But the second law of energy in thermodynamics says that's true, that all the energy is here, but it does change form, but only in one direction, from concentrated, the Big Bang, to dispersed through the galaxies. from order to disorder through the galaxies, from available to unavailable. And entropy is a measure of the unavailable energy that's still there, can't get useful work. There are three types of systems in thermodynamics: open systems that exchange matter and energy with the outside world, closed systems that exchange energy but don't exchange matter with the outside world, and isolated systems that don't exchange matter or energy. And of course, matter is a form of energy. The Earth is B. B. We get a lot of energy from the sun, no problem, billions of years here. But in terms of the fixed matter, which is a form of energy on this Earth, it's pretty well settled. We just get a little cosmic dust and some meteorites down here. So all of you have your smartphones in right now, and there are rare earths in those smartphones. They've been here since we blew off the sun and cooled off. There's not going to be any more. Here is what economics is about. We take available energy and materials out of nature, a rare earth, a metallic ore, a fossil fuel, and then we move it. We ship it, we extract it, we ship it, we store it, we produce goods and services from it, we consume it, and then we recycle it back to nature. At every step of that transition from nature to society back to nature, we have to embed a certain amount of energy or material into the product or service to get it to the next stage of what it becomes on that value chain. But in doing that, some of that energy and material is lost in the conversion. It's thermodynamics. This is called in economics aggregate efficiency. This is the ratio of potential work to the actual useful work that gets embedded in the good or service when you're moving it down the line, and what's lost. It works the same way in nature. If a lion chases down an antelope and kills it in the wild, about 10 to 20% of the total energy in that antelope finally gets embedded into the lion. The rest is heat loss in the chase and the consumption. That's its aggregate efficiency. So you're now saying to me, what the hell does this have to do with Mr. Rifkin's conversation with the Chancellor of Germany? She's a physicist by trade. And I said to her, we started the second industrial revolution in the United States at 3% aggregate efficiency. We lost 97% in every conversion across the economic value chain. By the late 90s, the U.S. got up to 14% aggregate efficiency, the rate of potential work to the actual useful work embedded in every single conversion. Germany, 10 years later, got up to 18.5% aggregate efficiency. That was its ceiling. Nothing's changed. Japan led the world at 20% aggregate efficiency, peaked in the late 90s. Nothing's changed. And I said to her, that's the ceiling of this technology platform of centralized communication, fossil fuel energy, and internal combustion transport. No one's going to get above 20%. Why is this important? A new generation of economists trained in thermodynamics have gone back and they've looked at every year of the Industrial Revolution, better machines, better workers, and then they plugged in aggregate efficiency. It amounts to much of the rest of the growth. Any engineer here could have told you this. Architect, chemist, biologist. Not a single, I teach in the oldest business school in the world, the executive education part of the Wharton School for a long time. Not a single business school in the world requires that you learn about the first and second laws of energy that govern all economic activity. All the other disciplines do, but they can't speak to the economists because they're in a different language set. You know, you come out of science. So, I said to the Chancellor, you can have market reform, labor reform, fiscal reform, and you can incentivize your own Silicon Valleys just like here, and it won't make any difference. As long as your businesses are plugged into centralized telecommunication, fossil fuel, nuclear power, internal combustion transport, you can't get above that 20% aggregate efficiency. That's the nature of the platform. You can incentivize a million Steve Jobs and create all these product lines, but if they're plugged into that second industrial revolution platform, you're not going to move. That's what's missing here, that narrative in this valley. So on that first day, we discussed a third industrial revolution, a new convergence of communication, energy, and mobility to manage power and move Germany. And at the end of the day, the Chancellor said, Mr. Rifkin, we will have this third industrial revolution for Germany. And I'll report back what we've done in the 10, 11 years since that first meeting in Germany. We are on the cusp of a new communication, energy, mobility platform to manage power and move the world. The communication internet is in. 25 years since the World Wide Web. Everybody has their smartphone. And now this communication internet is moving to 5G broadband. And it is just beginning to converge with a renewable energy internet. Millions of people are already producing their own renewable energy, pretty soon the whole human race, and they're taking it off grid or sending it back to an energy internet. And now those two internets, the communication internet and the renewable energy internet, are converging with the third internet, and that is GPS-guided, autonomous road, rail, water, and air transport fueled by renewable energies in fabricated manufacturing vehicles and drones. Communication internet, renewable energy internet, mobility internet, manage power and move economic life across the value chains. And they're on top, they're riding on top of a platform called the Internet of Things. We're embedding sensors in all of our devices, both in the economy and even in the wild environments. We have sensors in the agricultural fields and in the factories and in the warehouses and in the smart roads. We have sensors in smart homes and smart businesses and smart vehicles and warehouses. And they're beginning to monitor real-time activity. Where are they sending it to? They're not sending it to this mysterious thing called the cloud. They're sending it to this incipient platform of communication, energy, and mobility to manage power and move every value chain. By 2030, we're likely to have ubiquitous interconnectivity, machines talking to each other and moving to the energy communication and energy platforms. On the upside, what we're seeing here is we're creating a global brain and nervous system. All right? The brain is the satellites. The nervous system are the sensors. We're connecting the human race and the environments we live in. What this means is a potential great leap forward for the human race, because we can now engage everyone with a smartphone, and they can go up and engage everyone else at near zero marginal cost and begin to directly involve each other in collaborative commons and eliminate all those vertically integrated organizations that kept the 1% from the 99%. This is a potential vast extension of social entrepreneurialism and economic democracy on a massive scale, because of the entry costs are so low and the engagement is simultaneous and ubiquitous. We're becoming part of a planetary brain and nervous system. Now that's the upside. On the other hand, while that's pretty damn exciting, right? On the other hand, the minute we hear about global interconnectivity, we're excited and we're also frightened. Global interconnectivity, what about the dark net? How do we ensure network neutrality when the whole human race is connected? How do we ensure that governments don't purloin this global brain and nervous system for political purposes? We already have the Russians hacking the American elections. How do we ensure that global companies, some of them here in this valley on the internet, don't monopolize this global infrastructure for their own profit and gain and commodify our life, it's called our data, for their ends? How do we ensure privacy when everyone's connected? How do we secure our safety against cybercrime and cyber terrorism that could take down the system at any point? It's already hacking. Malware is moving all over the world. We're going to have to spend as much time on the dark net as we are on the bright net, because it's at least 50% of the game. And so we're going to have to build in diversity and resilience and create as distributed a system as we can. The more distributed, the more diverse, the more redundant, the less it's vulnerable to attacks on the system. The more centralized, the more vulnerable it is. But let's assume for this afternoon we're going to be able to address the dark net, and this means 3 generations here, you, your children, and grandchildren, are going to be engaged in a great political struggle to ensure this is open, that it's secured, that everybody's engaged, and no one controls the game. But let's assume we're going to be able to kind of wrestle through this. Here's the advantage of the bright net. Everyone in this room has a value chain. If you're a small startup here or involved with a large company here in the valley, and you're constantly extracting things from nature and moving them and storing them and producing goods and services from them and consuming them and recycling them, etc. What this BrightNet means is you can go up on this emerging Internet of Things platform. It's already here. It's starting. And you can get a transparent picture of all the economic data flowing through the world if it stays open. This levels the playing field. Even big companies didn't have this data. And that means that if you're a small business or a cooperative, you can go up on this platform and you can take the information you need on this platform for your value chain and cut it out from the rest of the noise for virtually free. You just need a service provider. Then you can mine the big data you care about for your particular enterprise, mine it with your own analytics. Create your own algorithms and apps. So you can dramatically increase your aggregate efficiency on your value chain, and by doing that, dramatically increase your productivity, dramatically reduce your ecological footprint because you're getting more out of each conversion and losing less, the aggregate efficiency, plunge your marginal cost. Those marginal costs are getting so low that it forces a change in the capitalist market. Because when your marginal costs get really low, your profit margins sink. So you have to move from traditional markets where you sell one-off goods to managing networks where you are making your margins on the volume of the traffic in blockchain networks, managing them around the world. Because when you get a volume flow like that, the low margins are made up by the commissions you get. Think of selling, if you have stock, every time there's a stock sale, there's a little commission, tiny. Some of the marginal costs are moving so low, they're heading to zero marginal cost, and it's given rise to a completely new economic phenomena that we didn't see coming called the sharing economy. Although I did write about it, and some of you remember the Age of Access, 2000, but my colleagues said, oh, come on, it's not going to happen. What is the sharing economy? Capitalism gave birth, and we didn't think this old system would give birth. And this little baby it gave birth to is it's right aside its parent, and it's a very strange relationship because the parent's trying to figure out how to nurture this little baby and let it grow and let it find an identity. On the other hand, sometimes parents want the little baby to be a complete reflection of the parent. Sometimes the little babies want to do that. Yes, I'll build my platform. When I cap it at $7 billion, I'll sell it to the guys over here. But there are a lot of folks out there who say, no, we've got a new proposition here. The sharing economy, as muddy it is as it is, some of it's going to attach to the capitalist market, some of it's going to be separate from it. This is the first new economic system to enter onto the world stage since capitalism and socialism. The sharing economy is a phenomenon. Already, whether you're out here in California, if you're in Brooklyn, or any of these places around the world, we have young people, millennials, part of the day right now. They're in the market as sellers and buyers and owners and workers, and they're exchanging goods and services. There's profit margins. But part of the day right now, there are millions of millennials who are producing and sharing all sorts of goods and services for nearly free outside the market and not counted in the GDP. So this isn't theoretical. When I wrote the book, Zero Marginal Cost Society, the first reaction was, isn't this something way off in the future? And I had to smile. Because we've already seen what zero marginal cost society has done to one of the three technologies of the next revolution, the communication internet. So let's run through that, and then we'll see what's happened in the energy internet, the mobility internet, and then everything that's going to be plugging into it, including what you're going to hear about later with the space platform, but I don't want to give away what's going to be happening in the next conversation here. So we have 3 billion people up there on the internet, and now the IoT, Internet of Things, and they are prosumers. They're still sellers and buyers and owners and workers, but they're prosuming. They're producing and sharing their own music. What does it cost to get a little digital recorder, put your music together, and whether you send it to one person or a billion people on the web, the cost is near zero. Just have a service provider. That Korean performance artist a few years ago, I can't do it, but he came out with his little song and dance. He got 1 billion people on that website in 3 months. It didn't cost him, the fixed costs were low, the marginal costs were zero. 1 billion people. We have young people producing and sharing their own music. Now their YouTube videos, open source all over the world. They're becoming the producers and the prosumers. They're bypassing the television networks. We have young people producing and sharing their own social media, bypassing the newspaper and magazine industry. They're doing their own e-books. We've got millions of kids taking massive open online college courses taught by the best professors, and the best universities are getting credits. And we've got Wikipedia. I don't know how Jimmy Wales did this. I would have said this could never work. This Wikipedia is the 6th largest website in the world. It's nonprofit. It costs $50 million in donations a year. And we are constructing the entire knowledge of humanity laterally, open source, for free. And the accuracy is, because apparently millions of people have nothing else to do but check each other's websites. So, you know, if I put something on my website, within an hour, there's everyone crawling all over the sentence. What about this? You got this wrong. I'm going to add to it. We're going to hyperlink. It works. Imagine we have democratized education for free on a zero marginal cost platform, and we've actually done this in 15 years. This is an historic paradigm shift. Not talked about much. It's definitely as significant as Google. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, whole industries have been disrupted since Napster. It's only been 17 years, right? So the music industry has declined, television has shrunk, newspapers and magazines have gone out of business. On the other hand, thousands of new businesses have emerged, profit and nonprofit. Not just Google, Facebook, and Twitter, but thousands of startups, profit and nonprofit. They're creating the connections, the apps, the platforms, they're mining the data, they're doing it all. We thought there'd be a firewall. While we could understand that zero marginal cost would affect the virtual world, we just didn't think it'd go over to the physical world. The Internet of Things breaks the firewall. We have now millions of people producing their own solar and wind electricity right now tonight, zero marginal cost. And pretty soon the whole human race within the next 30 years, I'll get to that, everybody. And now we have millions of young people that are sharing their vehicles, and within a few years they'll be autonomous, they'll be electric, they'll be fuel cell by 2020, 21, 22. They'll be 3D printed with recycled material, they'll be driverless with no labor costs, and then the drones are coming. Very low to zero marginal cost logistics. Let's go back to Germany. What's happened since that first conversation with the Chancellor? 33% of all the electricity powering this great capitalist economy in Germany is now zero marginal cost solar and wind. We're heading to 40% in the next few years, and we'll be 100% renewable energy way before 2040. What's interesting is the fixed cost. I want you to go back and we'll see the history that we learned from communications. When I was a kid in the 1940s, there were no computers. In the early 50s, my university, University of Pennsylvania, invented the first computer. Here's the museum, UNIVAC. They cost millions of dollars, those computers. And the chairman of IBM at that time said, well, we'll probably need 5 computers for the world. That was kind of an optimistic forecast. All right, everybody laughs. We didn't anticipate exponential curves. We did not see the Intel chip. So Intel started to realize they were, the Moore's Law, they were doubling the capacity on that chip and halving the cost every 2 years. And now China has a smartphone today for $25 with more computing power than sent our guys to the moon. So the same thing has happened in solar and wind. You know how much a solar watt cost in 1978, the fixed cost? $78 to generate 1 fixed watt. You know what it is today? 55 cents. 35 cents in 18 months from now. And it's interesting because these exponential curves, you know, if you double that dollar every day, it doesn't look like much on an exponential curve. 1, 2, 4, 8, $16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 5, 12. It doesn't look like much up until around that 21st. Is it the 21st day? Then it goes wild. We're in the 21st year, literally, of solar and wind. So we have now power and transmission companies in Europe, and at least one here in the United States now. They're buying long-term contracts for solar and wind, 20-year contracts right now, 4 cents a kilowatt hour. Now, what this means is this is a paradigm shift. This is a revolution. They are now moving below the cost of coal and gas and nuclear. They're on parity. We don't even need the tariffs. And here's what's going on in the boardrooms. The same thing that happened to the television industry and newspapers and magazines and the music industry and book publishing. I meet with CEOs in the power and transmission industry in Europe and America and China every month. And what the fear is in the boardroom, this is going on right now, it's called stranded assets. We now have $100 trillion in stranded assets in the fossil fuel industry. That's the Citibank of New York report a year ago. Did you hear what I said? $100 trillion. It's the largest bubble in history, the carbon bubble, and the little subprime mortgage will look like a parlor game. That's right now. Because the cost, the fixed cost, and now the marginal cost are moving solar and wind, and those marginal costs are moving to near zero. So what happens when German businesses plug into a third industrial revolution platform where the marginal cost of the energy in every single conversion of their value chain is near zero marginal cost? How do you compete with that? You can't. Someone should tell the folks in Washington, D.C. You can't compete with that. Who's producing all the new energy? We have 4 major power companies in Germany, EnBW, RWE, E.ON, and Vattenfall. We thought they were invincible 10 years ago. And what happened to them is what happened to the music industry, television, newspapers, magazines. Small players came together. Farmers, small businesses, urban neighborhoods, and they all created electricity cooperatives. They got low-interest loans from the banks. Nobody turned down. The banks knew they could pay back by the energy they were generating. Everyone got the loans. No one defaulted. And now they're producing all the new electricity. This is power to the people. Power to the people, literally and figuratively. The big 4 power companies, they're producing less than 7% of the power. They're out of it. This only took 10 years since that first conversation with the chancellor. Yeah. Now, what's interesting is, are they out of the game? No, but they're going to have to change their complete way of doing business. Most of them will go, some of them will not. So about 5 years ago, E.ON, one of the big 4 power companies, asked if I would debate their chairman. We did it in the Netherlands. We had a couple-hour debate, and I said, look, you're not leaving the second industrial revolution tomorrow morning, but it's sunsetting quickly. We're on an exponential curve here. And just like what happened in the communication industry and education industries and entertainment. So you need to find a way to ease out your legacy energy industry and at the same time create a new portfolio for a third industrial revolution business plan for renewables. So you be in both these portfolios over a period of years and transition out of the legacy energies and into the new sunrise energies. In the new industry, you make more money as a power company by selling less and less electricity. Yeah, that's what he did. He went, how do you do that? I said, what you do is you set up partnerships with thousands of enterprises, and you help manage the energy flowing through their energy internet, and you help them mine the big data, and you help them with their analytics so they can dramatically increase their aggregate efficiency day to day, 24/7 on their energy flows, so they can increase their productivity and reduce their marginal cost and ecological footprint. In return, those thousands of enterprises, they're going to share back some of their productivity gains with the power company. It's called performance contracts. He went like this. 5 years later, he just did it. And that is that E.ON put their nuclear and fossil fuel power on the market this year. No one's buying. He waited too long. Stranded asset. And they've moved into energy services. The RWE, one of the other 2 of the big 4, they've now moved to 2 companies, their old legacy companies, separated from their new energy management on the internet. ENGIE, formerly GDF Suez, is now moved in the same direction. ERDF and EDF, the great nuclear power in France, they joined us. My global group is laying out with regions this master plan across regions of Europe. And we're in northern industrial France right now, the old Rust Belt. And the president of the country, Macron's from there, and so is Marie Le Pen. This is the old Rust Belt. And ERDF and EDF are on the ground helping us lay down the grid. They're not leaving nuclear tomorrow, but they're not stupid. They're seeing the headwinds. Not just Europe, now China. China was a surprise to me. I'd never done any work in China, and sometimes history is very serendipitous. It's just, you never know. So this is really true. I was at Christmas a number of years ago, and I was up on Google. I love Google, actually, but we'll talk about them later. And I was on the internet, and I noticed that the premier of China, President Xi and Premier Li, had come into office, And Premier Lee had just put out his biography. I'd never met him, and he said that he had read The Third Industrial Revolution, the book. And he had instructed the central government to begin moving on these themes so that China would be among the leaders of this third industrial revolution, because he was very aware that they lost the first industrial revolution. They were occupied by colonial powers. They lost the second industrial revolution, didn't get into the tail end, and they didn't want to lose the third. They moved really quick. So I've been shuttling back and forth with the leadership ever since, and to show you how quick China moves, after my first visit with the leadership, 11 weeks later, the state China electricity grid, the largest in the world, announced $82 billion starting this last year, and the new 5-year plan just started, to completely digitalize the entire electricity grid, major grid of China, so that millions of Chinese people using their own solar and wind technology, because they're the largest producers, can produce their own electricity and use it off-grid or send it back to the new energy internet. Where's the U.S. here? Nowhere. I will say California, Oregon, Washington, and New York State. And we did San Antonio, the master plan for the 7th largest city. The rest of the country is moving back to the 20th century, even the 19th century. You can't afford to lose 10 years, both for the economy and for our planet. So, this is the communication and energy internets, and they're now converging with the automated GPS, driverless, road, rail, water, and air internet. We built the whole world economy on making and selling automobiles. That's what the 20th century is all about. Everything came off of that. Here's the problem. How many here are millennials under 38? Well, you've really messed things up. You're really throwing us a curve here. Apparently, you don't want to own automobiles anymore. That's grandma and grandpa. 2 automobiles sitting in the driveway, waxing them once a month, not doing anything. Maybe one of them sitting at the office 8 hours a day, that car, doing nothing. You want, see if I have this right, you want mobility and car sharing networks, not ownership of vehicles in traditional markets, correct? But here's the problem. For every car you're sharing, we're eliminating 15 cars from production. Larry Burns, former vice president of General Motors till a few years ago, just did a study of Ann Arbor, Michigan. He said, look, we're probably going to eliminate 80% of the vehicles really quick. The other 20%, they're going to be electric, they're going to be fuel cell, they're going to be operating near zero marginal cost energy, and they're going to be driverless by 2021. And there are now automobile companies just announced they're moving out of all internal combustion engines. Volvo started, they're all doing it in the 20s. They're all going to electric vehicles. So this is a revolution. Early first movers are starting. The shift to this third industrial revolution mobility internet means we got 1 billion cars, buses, and trucks out there choking us in traffic. They're the number 3 cause of global warming emissions. The number 1 cause is buildings. But across Europe, we're retrofitting those buildings and transforming into micro power generating sites and big data, distributed big data centers and charging stations. They are the IoT, by the way. The buildings are the IoT. The buildings are the smart technology that allows you to have distributed big data, not centralized, allows you to have micro power generation on or around the site, allows you to have charging stations and fuel cell stations on site, allows you the smart technology to actually then use that technology to connect across cities, regions, and continents like Wi-Fi. That is the IoT, the building infrastructure. So, anybody know what the number 2 cause of global warming emissions is? Yeah, cows. So I wrote a book on this in 1990, and the beef industry said, you're out of your mind. I love cows, but there's 1.3, 1.4 billion cows out there, and they take up almost 27% of the land mass of the earth. The methane they produce is 23 times more potent per molecule than CO2. The nitrous oxide coming from their feces is 288 times more powerful than a molecule of CO2. But no one talks about this. Even some of my colleagues who are prophetic in the environmental movement will never mention that we have to move down the food chain here and have a more reasonable diet for our health and for the health of our fellow creatures and to save the planet. If we can't even deal with the number 2 cause of climate change, we're really lost. 1 in 3 won't get us there. So let's take a look at transport. We're going to eliminate 800 million vehicles, the other 200 electric, fuel cell, autonomous. It's coming now. So does this mean this is the end of the transportation companies? No, not necessarily, but they're going to have to change their business model. So let me talk Daimler and Ford. These are the two companies that started the second industrial revolution. Daimler created the engine, and Ford figured out how to do it cheap. So last year, I worked with Daimler from time to time. The chairman of Daimler Trucks asked me to come to Germany. They wanted to introduce their new mobility internet. They had journalists come in from all over the world. I gave this narrative, and then Wolfgang Bernhardt, the chairman of Daimler Trucks and one of the 8 board of directors of Daimler, announced their new mobility internet. And apparently, no one knew this. They had quietly outfitted 300, now it's 400,000 trucks with sensors all over the trucks. They're on the road now. No one knew it. They're picking up big data. These are mobile big data centers. And they're picking up big data on traffic conditions, weather conditions, availability of warehouses moment to moment. And as that data starts to collect in real time, they are providing the big data for analytics to help everyone on their logistics get from A to B to C quickly. So then they went to a helicopter feed after he announced this, and they had a helicopter looking down at 3 trucks, and we're all talking to the 3 drivers, and we're saying hello in the trucks. And Wolfgang said to the drivers, take your hand off the wheel and take your feet off the pedal. They did. And then they became software analysts looking at the computer. They're analyzing the data. They were no longer drivers. The trucks platooned together, automated, and like a train, going down the German expressways in real time. The journalists were like, this is not science fiction. This is reality. We produced a new film with Vice, Third Industrial Revolution. It was premiered at Tribeca, but we did an opening with Ford Motor Company with their CEO, Mark Field, in January at the opening of the auto show. And now Ford is sponsoring that film. We just did screenings in San Francisco and now Miami, Los Angeles. Why are they doing it? They now have a mobility internet exercise themselves. They're teaming up with the largest bike sharing service so they can coordinate with their apps, the Ford autonomous vehicles as they come online, with bicycles in the cities. So there'll be less vehicles, yes, but they'll be able to then bring them together with bicycles and lower their ecological footprint, huh? Smart. So that's the system, but how do we finance this? We had this discussion in Brussels, when President Juncker came in. We've been working on this since 2001, and I said, we've got the money. The U.S. has the money. Everyone has the money. The issue is not the money. It's what we're spending the money on. I'll give you an example. In the EU, we spent about $740 billion equivalent U.S. dollars on infrastructure in 2012, which was a recession year. This is a typical year. The problem is we spent it on a second industrial revolution infrastructure: centralized telecommunication, fossil fuel nuclear power, internal combustion, road, rail, water, and air transport. That platform peaked in its productivity between 14 and 20% aggregate efficiency over the last 2 decades. There's nothing more to get out of it. So I said, if we just prioritize, put some of it in patching up that system, we don't want to go over the bridge and have it collapse or the roadways into a sinkhole. But if we reprioritize so that at least half of it goes into laying out this new digital infrastructure for a millennial digital generation, we're there in 30 years everywhere. We laid out the juvenile infrastructure of the second industrial revolution. The first industrial revolution, we laid it out in 30 years in the U.S. and Britain. We laid out the second industrial revolution from 1905 to 1928, juvenile infrastructure, then matured it after the war. We can do the same thing in 30 years. This is what we need if we reprioritize. So what are they talking about in Washington? Going back and just building out again and patching up the second industrial revolution. None of the narrative I have described to you today, if you heard this ever on TV or in the print, or even here in the Valley, some of it, yes, but not the story. Even here, it's the parts, it's the chapters, but not how it all comes together in a connective infrastructure, a nervous system to manage, power, and move along with an Internet of Things platform. Every industry is involved in this rollout. ICT, consumer electronics, power and transmission, telecom, transport logistics, advanced fabrication, manufacturing, life sciences, they're all involved. And it means jobs. In the long run, this system is moving toward an automated, smart world run by the algorithms and very supervisory workforces. But that's a 40-year transition. In the short run, we have a lot of labor intensivity to build out the infrastructure. Once it's built out, we know where the jobs are going to go. They're going to go to the social economy. You're not going to pay people to do nothing. The biggest employment sector in the world today is the social economy and the nonprofit economy and the sharing economy, because machines can't do that work. No machine is going to raise a 2-year-old in a child care center. They'll bring the orange juice to the kid. But human beings have to prepare other human beings for society. But in the short run, we've got 2 generations of massive employment. For example, in Europe, and we know this because we're already building it out, we have to take the entire energy infrastructure of Europe, and we're doing that, and transform it from fossil fuel nuclear infrastructure to renewables. It's hugely labor intensive, making them and assembling them. When you assemble a wind turbine and a solar panel, those are human beings. Robots don't do that. AI doesn't do that. Then we have to retrofit every single building in Europe, home, office, and factory, before we can transform them into an Internet of Things center. Heavy retrofits, insulation, windows, doors, robots and AI won't do that. It's too difficult, that agile physical work. It's got to be done by human beings, semi-skilled and skilled. Millions of jobs. We've already seen it. Then we have to take the entire electricity grid of every country and move it from servo-mechanical and dumb to smart and digital. Who's going to put in all the underground cable? Robots aren't going to do that. Come on, AI ain't going to do that. We have to take all those advanced emitters, assemble them, and start to manage. That requires semi-skilled, skilled, and professional work. And then we're going to have to take the whole transport infrastructure and move it from dumb to smart: road, rail, water, and air. That requires millions of charging stations. That requires smart sensors across the system. So there's 2 generations of work left. So I wrote this book, The End of Work, some of you remember, which I said we're moving to an automated world in 1995. But the new authors that are coming along, they have not understood that we are moving there, but that next 30 years is laying out this new platform, 40 years. It gives us a silver lining while we prepare young people for the social economy, employment in the nonprofit sector. All right. That's basically the frame. And in Europe, we've just dedicated 630 billion euros to moving this out across Europe. We have our 3 test regions in France, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. Now all 350 regions starting this year. Where's the U.S.? Let me turn the page for the last few minutes. And I'm going to say to you, it isn't just about the technology. If we just have the technology alone, we're not going to get there. I don't care how smart everybody here is in this valley, we're not going to get there. The technology enables, but then it's the issue is, what is the changes in human consciousness that allow us to then take this narrative and actually put it into practice? The technology, we're lucky, is there. And what I've said to people when we meet with heads of state and CEOs of companies, I always ask them, if this plan isn't the plan, can you tell me what your plan is? And I never hear them tell me what their plan is, because there isn't any. This is just the next stage of this revolution in technology, which is going to change our spatial temporal orientation, our economic models, our governance. It's not rocket science, although later you're going to hear about how we're going to do this in rocket science in about 20 minutes. Let me end by saying it's changing consciousness, and I'm only guardedly hopeful. I am not a utopian. I know where a lot of you folks are coming from around the valley. I'm not a utopian. I think that we'll always have our problems as a species. But I do believe that there is a change going on among millennials, and I'll just tell you what I think it is, and you can tell me if you think it is. The way I first started to see this change in consciousness, this paradigm shift, is with toys. It was really interesting to see this. The first commercial toys originated in Ravensburg, Germany. It was kind of a new idea in the 1700s. It's a beautiful little town. Traditionally, a parent would bring home a toy to maybe an 8 or 9-year-old little girl and say, look, it's not Santa Claus didn't bring you this toy. We actually bought this toy at the store, and we bring it home to you. This is your toy. It's not your brother's toy. It's not your sister's toy. It's your toy. You have to take care of it. You're responsible for it. It's property. You remember this? So the first thing that 9-year-old girl hears is, not my brother and sister's toy. That's pretty interesting. That means power, negotiation, status. They're never going to use this toy unless I get something in return. They're learning about market exchange, correct? We all went through this. None of that's wrong. I don't have a problem with property exchange in markets. But now we've got millennials who are in their 30s, and they're parents, and they are going up on toy sharing websites. And those websites have thousands of toys, and you pay a subscription, and then you can get any toy you want by age category, and you're in the system. You bring the toy home, and now the parents are saying to that little 8 or 9-year-old, this toy, another little child played with this toy. She had a really good time with it and took good care of it because she knew one day you'd want to play with the toy. And you'll have a good time with it, and you'll take good care of it because one day you'll want another child to have the toy and take care of it. This child is learning the toy is not possession, it's not property, it's not status. It's an experience for a moment of time, then pass it on in the sharing economy. The child's getting ready for the sharing economy, the circular economy. Nothing goes to the landfill. We produce it, we share it over and over and over. And pretty soon those toys are going to be coming to that home in a drone with no one manning that drone, no one staffing the drone, zero marginal cost renewable energy. The Chinese already have the drone that'll pick you up and deliver you. That's a revolution in the way kids think. So I think we're going to have a hybrid system. Part of the day we're going to be in the market with property. I don't think it's going to disappear. But part of the day we're already in this sharing economy. We're producing and sharing things that are distributed for nearly free. Here are the other things I think are changing. We are seeing a change among millennials and how they conceive freedom, power, and identity. And I'll end with this. Freedom. Since the Enlightenment, we had a clear view of freedom for a couple hundred years now. Freedom is the ability to be self-sustaining, autonomous, independent, not beholden to others, right? So for us, freedom was exclusivity, all right? So that we didn't have to be at the whim and call of tyrants. But for a millennial generation that grew up on the internet, the notion of freedom being autonomy, being an island to oneself, exclusivity, that's death. Take away the smartphones, that's withdrawal. So for a millennial generation, grew up on the internet, freedom is defined by how many, the access you have to how many communities and how many sites so that you can share your talents and increase if you will, the well-being of the entire network and increase your social capital, correct? So for you, freedom is not exclusivity, it's inclusivity. It's not ownership, it's access. It's not markets, it's networks. It's not just market capital, it's social capital too. Do I have this right? That is a real revolution, not taught in the schools. That's why it's a revolution. But then we're seeing that young people have a different sense of power. We grew up in a world where we thought of power as a pyramid. And it's always top down, from the one to the many. But then the millennials who grew up on the internet, you see power not vertical, but lateral, right? So power is the ability to be in networks where you can advantage a network and advantage your own social capital. That is a revolution, and that's why Occupy said the 1%, the 99%, we want to scale it laterally, not vertically. The interesting thing about this Internet of Things platform is its architecture. The first and second industrial revolution architecture platform was designed to be centralized, top-down, proprietary, and closed and vertically integrated. That's the only way you could move the communication, energy, and mobility. There was no other way to do it for economies of scale. But if you look at the third industrial revolution platform, it's designed to be distributed, not centralized. The Internet of Things, it's designed to be open and transparent, not proprietary and closed, correct? It scales best when millions of people come together in the networks, laterally scaled power. You can try to monopolize it, which some big companies are doing, but then you lose the productivity, you lose the efficiencies, and you lose the value of the network. So what we're seeing is a basic shift in freedom and power. And finally, identity. I grew up in a geopolitical world. And since the post-Westphalia, the 30-year war and the Westphalia Agreement to set up nation states, we are very clear about identity. Each of us is a sovereign citizen of a sovereign nation. And as a sovereign citizen, as a sovereign nation, autonomous citizen, we compete with other sovereign citizens in our nation and other nations for scarce resources in the marketplace, zero-sum game. That's what we get up every day, that's what we do, then we go to sleep. The nation state is sovereign, and they represent all our citizens who are sovereign, and they compete with other nation states for scarce resources in the marketplace and the battlefield. Zero-sum game. Can anyone here tell me how we're going to have the human family come together, save our species, steward our fellow creatures, and restore this planet to health with that worldview? So we've got young people coming home now. They grew up on the internet, they're digital natives, and they are aware of the biosphere. That's that 19 kilometers, not very long, from the stratosphere to the water, where life and the chemicals of the planet interact to maintain this bizarre, wonderful, awe-inspiring experience called life. So they're coming home in high school, and they're saying to their parents, they're saying to their dad, why are you using so much water while you're shaving? We got a drought situation here from climate change. Some of you are aware of this. Or they're saying to their parents, why is that TV on in the other room? We haven't been in there for 2 weeks. Shut it off. Why we have 2 cars? We haven't used that second car in 6 months. Why not car share one? They're saying to their parents. The one that my wife and I are particularly fond of, we're animal rights activists. We've got young people coming home, and they're asking where the hamburger came from on the plate. This is happening in lots of countries now. They're asking, did that hamburger come from the rainforest, for example, of Central America? Did they have to destroy all the trees in that rainforest for 6 inches of topsoil to graze that cow for the hamburger on the plate? And the kids know, and they say to their parents, if those trees are destroyed to graze the cow for the hamburger, there's rare animal life and plant life that rely on that particular canopy, they go extinct. And if the trees are no longer there to graze the cow, to raise the cow for my hamburger, then those trees aren't there to absorb CO2 from industrial emissions. That means the temperature of the planet goes up. That means some farmer can't feed their children in a subsistence farm because they're getting spring floods and summer droughts and wildfires. The hamburger. The kids are learning ecological footprint. They're learning that everything we do in real time, thermodynamically, affects everybody else. Our fellow human beings, our ecosystems, our fellow species, the planet we live in. We are all interconnected, and our individual well-being depends on the well-being of the rest of the system. If the system starts to collapse, we go with it. Doesn't make any difference how rich you are. And I notice a lot of wealthy people are trying to find a way off the planet. Not going to happen. Not in our lifetime. So what I'm saying is I'm guardedly hopeful when I see these shifts in consciousness. But here's what I would say we need to do here, especially where we are right now in California. We've got the best and brightest here. We've got young people here who understand the digital revolution. You're on fire. You've got energy. And the key is to commit ourselves not just for the bottom line, but for humanity here. We need a generation of digital natives in the millennial generation who are going to commit to saving our species and our fellow creatures who have a right to be here with us and without us. We need a generation with the skills in this room that can begin to imagine how we create global collaborative commons, how we begin to steward our ecosystems, how we begin to share our common destiny with each other, how we begin to reduce our footprint, ecological footprint on this earth. Zero marginal cost is the ultimate metric for getting us off climate change, because if all of us around the world are moving with this technology revolution embedded in everything, and at every stage of our conversion on this technology platform with our resources from nature, we are optimizing our conversions by minimizing the amount of material and energy we're using. And then what we do make is recycled in a circular economy, shared over and over and over. Nothing goes to the landfill. When it does go back, we can use it and regenerate again in a generative economy. This is the only way we have a shot of addressing climate change, and we have to scale it in every city and region. We're doing it in Europe, and we've shown that we can do it. We're starting in China with the China Net Plus plan. And what I would say to the young generation in this room, spread this narrative across this valley. Spread it across the valley. And then talk to all your colleagues in the millennial generation and get them into the narrative. so they can move from this little individual product lines and platforms and move to how we integrate a new communication, energy, mobility infrastructure across an Internet of Things nervous system to transform this world. And hopefully, we'll be able to beat this race on time and at least avoid the abyss and start rejuvenating this planet. So when your children look back at you, they'll say you did the right thing. Tomorrow morning.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you, and thank you, Jeremy Rifkin, for a wonderful presentation to share with us. And he needs to catch a flight, so please excuse him, to share with us his vision for humanity and what we can do and accomplish by working together. A very important part of what he talked about was the consciousness of this type of a movement. And I'd like to just invite you to take a moment to close your eyes and just go ahead and close your eyes now and feel what he just said. That our species is faced with extinction. Unless we learn to work together and live together and address these problems. So in just a few minutes, I'm going to bring Diego Favarolo up to the stage to share with you the Open Space Network and the Space Operating System and the information that you need to know about this. But before we do that, we have a short video to share with you a little bit more about what this vision is.